And what you did is you created social responsibility in the organization. Are
Mm,
we going to be a success? Are
right.
we create and inspire positive motivation that says, hey, we can reach this goal. All we got to do is this. The organization has to make a profit for us to have jobs.
I always tell my business coaching clients that leadership is the problem and leadership is the solution. Over the next 40 minutes, you are getting a masterclass in how you can lead your company, lead yourself, lead your organization by Rhonda Parker Taylor, who specializes in leadership development. Enjoy the conversation. Welcome to the Common Sense Show. And today I'm speaking with Rhonda Parker Taylor, who is a leadership and personal development coach. She's an author, academic. I mean, what doesn't she do? She does pretty much everything. Today, we're talking about leadership development and how it's important for leaders in order to move their organization. They have to understand the people in their organization. How can you do that? How can you be better in tune with the people that work for you? That's what we're talking about today. Rhonda, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And I can't wait to get into some common sense practices that can help us all through leadership. So let's get at it. And all of you out there, pull up a chair, turn it up on your car, whatever you need to do so that you can get some tips and tricks that we're going to talk about today.
I see what you did there. That was pretty good. So, so my first question is, um, you have academic experience in understanding leadership, specifically the EQ behind leadership. But I'm sure in the process of putting together your academic research, you've uncovered other things about leaders as well. Maybe that didn't make the paper, but your observations. Tell me what first you observed as a fundamental lack of quality in leadership across the multinational corporations, the leaders of those corporations that you studied.
Sure, I would love to. And I'd like to say I've been blessed to be able to work with all the different leaders, to even have an idea. When you walk into a room as a leader, or in my case, I was an academic leader. When I did my research, which is the multinational leader and the domestic leader differences in EQ, you don't know what you're going to find. You have a hypothesis. So my hypothesis was that leaders that work multinationally, more than one country, were going to have a higher EQ, which is the emotional intelligence quotient, than the domestic leader. And in general, that was the case. That the domestic leader works in one country and theirs were lower scoring in the emotional intelligence quotient, the 21 different characteristics. But what I didn't think I would find was that the domestic leader has two quotients that were higher than the multinational leader. So I had to really dive in to figure out what in the heck is going on here. What is leadership on the domestic level versus the multinational level? Leadership is the ability to motivate and work through problems in your organization through people, because you can't do it all yourself. There are soulpreneurs out there that are listening. Don't tone out on me, because we're not there yet. When you're an entrepreneur and you start your organization, because every business typically starts by one or two people, and you add to that layer where others have to contribute to the organization, the leader must lead.
Yeah.
Entrepreneur levels, typically you start out not just the leader, but you're also the doer. And you have to make that transition, whether it's the first generation of that organization or the second. You have to lead, which it's a cliche to say mission, vision, but I also want to say your thoughts, your values, and your views must be known so people know how to do the role of their job. If they don't have that, you're going to have job dissatisfaction.
Yeah, it's so true. And, it's what I find often when I am working with, my business coaching clients who are, first time business owners or second time business owners, or even businesses that they've inherited from family, is that, no one really teaches leadership. And oftentimes how you perceive leadership is observed from your past experiences through people who have been in a position of leadership in your life, whether that's parents, whether that's teachers, some authority figure has taught you your perception of leadership, and you filter those observations and create your own kind of style that you kind of piece and puzzle together. But then I think, to your point, like if you're leading a solo company, you still have to lead yourself. And so many people discount that, which is the fact that people like to be led and we have to lead ourselves. So when we disappoint ourselves, if we don't follow through with the things that we're supposed to, the net result of us disappointing ourselves because we fell through is that instead of feeling disappointed in ourselves, we may just lack the motivation to continue to do the things that we want to do, because it's like, well, I can't do that. But it's because we didn't follow through. But in a multinational corporation, it seems obvious why leaders in multinational corporations, would have a stronger EQ in some senses, because that they have to cross the cultural divide and they have to understand, like, the boots on the ground. What is it like to operate in this culture, which requires understanding?
Exactly. And the thing that I found with the domestic leader is that understanding was missing. It was the big fish in the small pond. More, you could call it an authoritarian feeling, but it's more transactional.
Mm.
And so you have to go back and think about.
By the way, I didn't pay Rhonda to say that I was right about that. I just happened to be right because I thought
You have to look at the fact that not only do you have to have self-regard, you talked
Right.
about a model. My first model of business was my father and my mother. They opened up a steel manufacturing plant in a barn, and it grew to a mid-size organization. So while a lot of my peer group might have been out playing outside, I probably was sitting in front of a television putting plastic feet for metal aquarium stands in a baggie, watching Elvis Presley or whatever the old school shows were on, putting them so I could get money for whatever I wanted, because we got paid, probably $1 1,000 or something. So that was my model for my first leadership, my first leader. And in that, they would say, if it's meant to be, it's up to me.
Mm.
Now, as a leader, going back and thinking about that, how true is that? Yes, you have to get people to follow, but you also have to get them in line with your thoughts, views, and values to be able to get them to follow. So if they're not in alignment, if I haven't done my job as a leader, if it's meant to be, it's up to me, they're not going to move. The product's not going to get to market. That doesn't mean I'm doing it, though. The self-regard part of it is I have to cultivate confidence in self and my employees and my people around me, and have the creative ability to engage them, not only in doing exactly what I say, but taking those risks when needed to make sure we're successful. Innovative thinking. So you have to have self-regard to nurture yourself as a leader, but also self-regard to nurture your people behind you. Or guess what? You're going to have to do everything. You're going to have to go out there and do everything. And that is not a helping behavior for yourself or for your organization.
Yeah, it's so spot on, because, one of the things I've uncovered is that the biggest gap between the small business owners, whether they have a team of 1, 2, or 50 or 100, that the people who make the biggest turnaround, the quickest turnaround, are the people who are highly effective communicators. And communication is literally the difference between great leadership and just average leadership, because communication sets the expectation, it holds the course, and it praises the individuals for whom the mission has been set for them, and to thank them for the work that they've done and they've accomplished based off of the plan that was laid out for them. But communication also prevents misunderstandings from happening from the very beginning,
Mm-hmm.
and it reduces mistakes, and it reduces instances where there's a quasi idea in the organization about what needs to be done, but it's not entirely clear. And in those instances where a project is held up because of just the inability for that clear message to be defined, and without any mistakes or without too many check-ins. But
What
it's
you're
yeah,
you are exactly right, because in emotional intelligence, there's two buckets of communication. There's the intrapersonal communication, and
mm,
there's the inter, which is the social aspect of it. But that doesn't mean the leader has to be sitting there talking all the time.
right.
There's a difference between communication and talking.
Right.
Communication is a give and a take, and that includes their emotions.
Yeah.
Allowing the space for your people to dissent from what you're saying, or express both the positive and the negative of what you're saying.
Yeah. So a case study in this is that I have a client who we went through the mission, the vision, everything. They made a nice, beautiful sign for their employees, that has the mission and vision, and has the how they work, so the expectations of work, and then how it's defined. Right, like, okay, how do I ask the questions to achieve this expectation so that I can reach the mission? Therefore, the vision can hopefully get accomplished, and all that is on one sign. So it's a nice sign; everyone can see it, because I told them print it up, put it everywhere, make it big, so that everyone can see it. That
Visualize.
is
Yeah.
visualization. Yeah. So that is a filter through which everything moving forward has happened. So if you want to turn around, you first have to have the roadmap. So that's the roadmap. That's the filter. Recently, in our coaching session, what's been uncovered is that some employees have been there's a lot of gripes, right? So not outright contentions and
Right.
battling, but just gripes about this didn't happen, or that didn't happen, or this wasn't communicated, like a little pieces of micro cracks, that can show up in a foundation. And so I just simply bring it back to the foundation that we poured with them. I'm just like, listen, you need to filter every conversation through what was already created. So we spent so much time doing this. It's just like, you have to filter your conversations and your expectations and your communication through the filter that we've already created for you. And then when you're confused, you simply go back to that, and then you
You
go
can.
forward again.
Right.
And when you tie it to a centralized mission that everyone is subjugated to, I noticed, including the leaders of the company, you're all in it together, right? Like, you all kind of trying to sort your way based off of your role and your responsibility through that. Um, what have you seen in terms of how leaders? Do you think that some of the kind of the branches or the followays of employees that don't end up sticking together with the leader, do you think it has something to do with the leader's ultimate deviation from what the core structure of the mission and the vision is in the
Or
company?
they never bought in. Both.
No,
It's
yeah,
both. Because, see, if you don't take the emotional part of everyone, because not everybody's going to express. When you created that beautiful model and
right.
everybody started going in there were probably a few that hadn't bought in.
Hmm.
So, and then there was probably a manager or somebody that was deviating and going back to their old behavior,
Right.
because they wanted it to be transactional
Hmm.
instead of, um, transform transforming the organization. So you get this resistance to change if you don't address all the emotions in the room. And it could be If you do it that way, it's going to cause accounting 10 more hours of work, and you're not going to give me that overtime. They might have expressed it. They might not have expressed it. If you do it this way, then, I'm not getting a voice, because it always starts with something, there's always these little minor details that sometimes can derail or the entire process. And you're right. It's all about the leader, getting them to stay on task and
Yeah.
continually putting it through to them. And it's also addressing every emotion in the room. And that's hard to do, because you
Yeah.
can't do it in a meeting. It's not that you're going to have an hour meeting every time someone has, a question, or they've found another crack, for instance. But there should be some kind of feed loop that they can get it back to the main person, decision maker, to say, hey, we're finding this, or hey, this is costing 10 more hours of work, or hey, did you know when we did this, technology update, that there's 1% of the clients that are getting the wrong letter, or whatever it might be that's causing problems, that
Right.
they've done on this innovative process. The thing is when you understand the emotions in the room and how they influence the whole creative process, you can eliminate a lot of the cracks,
Mm-hmm.
but not all of them, because things come up, life hits, people's attitudes change. Someone's going through a divorce now, and they weren't before, and now they're unhappy, and they're picking a different target. But emotional expression is very, very important to making sure everybody understands the goals and has bought in. And once you get them um, into that cocoon of the organization and buying in, then you're going to have everybody showing assertiveness in that process. Now, assertiveness sometimes has a negative connotation. Some people think that means you're a bully. No, effectively communicating is
Mm-hmm.
assertiveness. If you're not a verbal person, you find a way to do it. If it's effectively communicating your emotions, your changes, your innovations, and how the process is affecting you as an employee of the organization, whether you're a leader employee or whether you're, doing the floors, it doesn't matter. You're still, you're still an employee of the organization and have emotions to what that change and innovative is. And you need to be able to communicate it.
And so, how does a leader in the business, again, whether it's a small business, medium, or large, how do they set the tone for that part of, we talked about right before we started recording, kind of this aspect of the job being a soft science, right? This is
Mm-hmm.
people management is software, it's not hardware. um, and so you need updates often, and you need to watch it carefully. How do you combine the intense drive of where you want the company to be with the soft science part of it, with bringing this group of people with you?
Well, the first thing is you have to allow people to have some kind of independence, and know your staffing levels well enough to know where do you need more of a transactional, you know, um, approach to your leadership, and where you need more of a transformer, and how do you get the ones that you have to have transactional with more to the transforming, because they're never going to feel self-actualized until they get to that point. Even if it's a lower level employee, that's taking calls. We've all been there. I worked in a call center once. I worked at Arby's. When you're doing that, the day-to-day grind, if you don't feel like you have some kind of stake in it, you're
Mhm.
going to have problems. So to get people to understand the importance of the soft skill is through performance of numbers.
Right.
You take those hard numbers and show how it's benefiting. Turnover's gone down. Um, job satisfaction is going up, production goes up, but it's all about setting the skill set with the employee with the matrix that makes sense for that organization.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's important. I had a client who was, their sales team in the organization. They were like 10 days away from the close of the month, so they wanted to hit their numbers. And so they were trying to figure out how to hit the numbers, and it never dawned on them. I said to them, "Okay, these are adults that typically have engaged with you in the past. Maybe you should send an email. Just send an email. Here's what you do. Put a visual of the goal, almost like that, the church fundraiser thing
Right.
where the needle goes up. I said, take a visual of that and then make it so that they see where you are month to date with your goals. Thank them for the work that they put in. Encourage them that we still have work to do, that you believe in them and that you think that they can get there." And so she sent that out, and next thing you know, they not only did they hit, they crushed. They ended up blowing in 10 days. They blew that um, that target out the water by like $68,000 in that month, and I thought it was amazing. But I think that kind of is kind of what you're talking about.
It
It's
is.
using
Exactly.
data driven knowledge to enforce software behaviors.
What you did is you created social responsibility in the organization. Are
Mm,
we going to be a success? Are
right.
we create and inspire positive motivation that says, hey, we can reach this goal. All we got to do is this. The organization has to make a profit for us to have jobs.
Right.
That is the goal of the organization.
Mm-hmm.
And we can say, oh, but we want to have this and we want to have that. Well, the bottom line is you still have to make a profit or there is no organization.
That's
So the
right.
social responsibility part of the leader is to communicate how do we do, what do we need to do to meet this goal?
Yep.
Like you just said, the fundraiser mentality. And how do we get our people to want to accomplish that? And by giving that social responsibility, we've done so well, we're doing this, we're almost there. That's a perfect example of showing an understanding of where the organization needs to be in their mission.
Yeah. I want to shift gears and under the umbrella of leadership and talk about something slightly different, which is that there's an effect that I kind of affectionately term entrepreneurial apathy, um, because I just made it up and it just seemed like what it was to me, which is when an entrepreneur or business leader has been successful for a period of time, and then they get into a rut by relying on their own previous success or comfortability for what they are, and their their leadership muscles become atrophied as a result of their enjoying part of the success that they're in, and therefore things start to suffer within the company because of this entrepreneurial apathy. Um, and how does a leader rebound from this feeling of once having succeeded and been successful and had some success, and then it cratering, because this happens oftentimes when people start businesses, right? They become being successful, the hockey stick starts growing up, and of course there's other factors that they can't control that come in that that might harm the business, but like sometimes they lead in a downward trajectory because they just got apathetic um, over time, given that they feel like maybe what they're trying is not working. It's kind of hard to punch your way out of this situation. How do leaders, not how do leaders respond to this? That could, I guess, be an answer, but how did they reframe it? How did they take control back?
They're in stagnation is what they're in. Like you said, apathy. So
Yeah.
brings the desire back to you? Well, first of all, if you're an entrepreneur, you have gone through some ups and downs and arounds, and you're tired, and you realize that you're successful now. What you have to do is you have to go back to the drawing board. There's, if you don't, what's going to happen is you're going to see a decline in your business, and you might even be depressed. So what you have to do is you start like you're from scratch. Start with the miracle question. If everything was perfect tomorrow, what does it look like? And then you have to reevaluate every aspect of your job and yourself. It may mean that you need to start being more intentional in your own life. Maybe, because you've done it yourself for so long, you might need someone that's able to motivate you. You might need a coach, that can stand beside you and say, wait a minute, that worked in the 80s, but we're in 2025,
Right.
and you need technology to help you do this, or you need more people skills because you're relying on too much on technology, because sometimes people get tired of the technology. Whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
you have to go and reevaluate your whole vision, mission, and is it sustainable past you?
Right. Yeah.
Because so many times we build it up just around ourselves. And if it's not sustainable past yourself, who's your next person in command?
Right.
Is your organization, because you're an entrepreneur, going to close because you're no longer there? This is something that I have to ask myself, because with me being a researcher and a coach, and I've had, and then I have siblings that run the family organization. It's an actual corporation now. It's not a mom and pop anymore.
Right.
So I have siblings, and they say, well, could you sell it? Do you have what is the goal plan again? Now that you've made it, what are you going to do with it? How are you going to pass a baton? And then you can find new energy. Is there new markets you need to be in? Where are you going to get remotivated in doing what you do? And then once you have that idea and reality testing, really, of who you are, what you want to be, where you want to go when you grow up, understanding, you redefine your purpose. You go back to that purpose, that vision, that mission, and redo it again. Organizations should be doing that every 3 years anyway.
Right.
Because if they're not doing that, how are they going to keep up to what's going on in the world today? Especially today with all the tariffs and everything else they're announcing. You better be on top of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
You'll
That's
hungry one day.
yes. If you're in manufacturing, you'd better be paying attention. That's for sure. Yeah, I think that's a good point. Is that you have to go back to fundamentals. So I did have a client. And this is great because I'm kind of just spitballing, giving you stuff that actually happened as case studies, and we're talking about this. But I did have a client who suffered from entrepreneurial apathy, and what I had them do is I came in as an interim CEO for 60 days, and I simply had them go back to sales. And that grounded them so much because it reminded them of what it was like to get revenue in. It gave them a purpose. It gave them a target. It challenged with their initial. It's like when you have red meat for the first time or ice cream. There was a video of a baby I saw that had his first lick of ice cream, and then his eyes went really big, and then it tried to grab the ice cream cone. But it kind of reinvigorated their sense, because it's you versus me. It's something inside of them that it kind of churned up, and it changed everything about their perspective. And I find that you're right, that anchoring yourself to a direction, to a directive, to a mission, to something that's tangible, like a goal that's tangible, moves the needle. Why do leaders not face their goals you talked about going over mission and vision again every 3 years or so. Why do leaders avoid those type of exercises?
It means work. It's painful to look at your mistakes, how far you've come, and you have to do it again. It's emotional.
Right.
It makes you face your fears. It makes you face your successes. It makes you face all of the things that we all don't want to face. sometimes we have a fear of success.
Yeah.
So we maybe get to where we get to and like, oh, that means I can spend more money and that means I can go to a ball game and that means but what ends up happening is when you get to that point and you stop, that means you've tapped out your life cycle of your organization and you're getting ready to hit decline if you don't hit the pause button and redefine. And redefining means you have to redefine what success looks like for you.
Right.
Maybe getting retirements for everybody that's donated to your success. Maybe it's making sure that that you get to the next level, and maybe you're a $1 million company and you want to be a $10 million company, or whatever those success matrices are. You have to face them. When I was writing my first fiction novel, Crossroads, I went out and I found an appropriate partner that was a publisher.
Yep.
And after 2 years of working with them, they canceled the contract. And so I put it aside and didn't do anything with it. Like you're talking about, the disappointment, the time, the energy. Do I start doing query letters again? It was all so overwhelming for me until one day my older sister said, why aren't you doing anything with your writing? And I said, well, I got this client and I got this going on. And she said, no, because if it was anybody else's project, it would be done. So you're asking, the choir here, basically, we're talking together. And I said, well, and she said, you're afraid to make yourself vulnerable again. And I was like, what do you mean? Of course your siblings don't know you at all and don't know what's going on in your life. And they don't know anything about your leadership. They don't, what do they know? They're just your sibling. But how true is that for every leader?
Yeah.
Every time you step in one of those meetings with, whether it be a solopreneur or a whole group in a boardroom, and you go through the meetings and you chop everything up again and start it all over again, you're making yourself vulnerable. And that means there's more work to be done. Do you have the energy? Do you have the power? Or are you fearful of what you're going to hear from your own staff even sometimes?
Yeah.
Are you fearful of rejection? Or is someone going to tell you you're not as successful as you thought you were?
That's powerful. Yeah.
Comes out.
Yep. That's the fear, right? Like, it's just like that. As humans, we like to, draw the sting. We always like to draw the sting, right? Which is to try to get that painful part out of the way, or just avoid it altogether. But like, it's so right. It's true. It's like at a certain level, you feel like you've done everything for so long at a certain level, and to be told that you're not at the level that you think you are, and that imposter syndrome kind of kicks in. And am I really what I've been saying I am for the last X amount of years? And it's devastating.
Do it again. Do you have the energy to do it again? And there's a big fear for leaders that did it. I had this leader that I tested for the UN Global Compact Committee's study, and they wanted to know why they were just a mediocre leader. And I'm like, well, I bet we're going to find it in the emotional intelligence score, because emotional intelligence is your right brain, which is your creative thinking, your ability to get people to lead people. And I looked at the score number and it was high. And I was like, well, maybe it's not emotional intelligence. Dig it a little deeper. But then I went to every one of the 21 characteristics, and there were 2 that was almost a 0.
Interesting.
And they were both under stress management. One is impulse control. And the other was stress management. So stress tolerance. So every golfing event, every big event, every fun thing, gone. Every stressful event, door closed. Well, of course you're not. If you can't face the fear, face the process, and face the mission and the vision of the organization to get it done. Nobody's going to follow you if you're not leading.
Yeah, that's true. And plus, do you really want to follow someone who, if he scored low on impulse control, it's probably evident to the people that specific characteristic too, being low on things like impulse control, are probably one of the more public features of a personality defect that we have too. So there's no doubt that he was displaying this lack of impulse
In a
control
variety of ways.
to everybody in his organization. And what's funny is, if you probably surveyed, which I don't know if you did, maybe you can speak to it, but if you probably surveyed everybody in the organization, they may not use the term impulse control, but they might say, oh, he just tends to make a decision on a whim or too fast.
Yeah,
Or
exactly.
it doesn't seem like there's a rhyme or reason why he decides what he decides.
Right. We've known leaders like that. We see them all the time.
Yeah. And it's funny because you don't think that those things, we call it kind of going with your gut. And it's like, there's a place for that, but high stake leadership in big multinational corporations, that can, we've seen these companies fail.
Right.
Just not as often, of course, but often enough, where they were once like global dominators in the space, and now they don't even exist. They have no real estate. They have no shares. They have no employees. They're gone.
Exactly. And that's not what you want for your organization, for yourself or your employees. Stability and certainty is important. And being able to problem solve and go through, the whole process brings coalition together, so
Right.
that everybody knows what their role is in the mission.
Yeah, there's almost nothing that is more crucial in an organization that I found coaching these businesses than defining roles in an organization, so that everybody knows exactly, precisely what part they play in the story.
Exactly. And if you know it, and it allows you then to not only feature the behaviors of the organization in a way that is successful, but you also are able to put the hard skills into place, because once you understand everything and you go with the organization's mission and vision, and then you have your model in order, people know what to do. They always know what to do. If this happens, look, okay, I can do that. If this happens, look, I can do that. And if you hold people accountable for meeting those standards, everybody will understand, because they know what the goal is and they know how they contribute.
So how does a leader begin to understand themselves in this process of becoming a better leader? Because there is going to be some disassociation in our own minds between who we think we are and what we actually are. So how do we figure that out?
You have to deconstruct yourself. You have to deconstruct your views, your thoughts, your behaviors, your values. Where did you learn them? How did you learn them? We learn from our parents, our faith, all our schools, our communities, etc. I'll give you a good example. And it has nothing to do with business, but it's about, we all have biases.
Mm-hmm.
I was told when I was young, never be around a peanut, because you're gonna end up in the hospital, maybe dead. So I went my whole life, everybody time we go out to eat or anything as a family, they say no peanuts, make sure there's no oil, make sure, all these safety precautions. Guess what? I ate a peanut. Nothing happened. My views and my values, except for I started sweating, and I felt like I was going to get sick, and I was having all these ideas of what was going to happen to me, but nothing happened.
Right.
Tested, guess what? You're not allergic to peanuts. So I say this because we come with thoughts and ideas that sometimes aren't accurate. when it comes to our business practices. We might hear that by riding someone's back, they produce better, or we might hear that, a loud voice gets more done, or there's so many different models of leadership, that don't work
Right. Yeah.
or outdated or won't work with Zen X,
Right. Yeah.
whatever it might be. Deconstruct your thoughts, your views, your values. And then when you know yourself, you can make changes.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. That makes sense. Rhonda, how can those who are watching, who, for instance, want to develop stronger leadership characteristics, how can they get in contact with you and engage with you so they can become a better leader?
They can go to my website, rhondaparkertaylor.com. On there's a link to send emails or all my social medias if you just want to see if there's a new book out or learn more about, different podcasts like the Common Sense show. It's real important that you use your time wisely as a leader. So make sure that if you enjoyed this podcast, that you like, share, and use it again for a tool that your tools are in your toolbox for a reason. You can drive and go to that sales call and listen to a podcast. You can look at people's websites and learn a lot. But feel free to reach out and I'll be glad to help you.
Now I have one big question that's left, and the one big question is what could business owners, business leaders do tomorrow or today that would help them understand the pulse of the people who work for them in their company?
Today. There's so many of them. I had about 10 of them go through my mind all at once. I would say have the breakfast with the CEO day where you get everybody together and you just listen. Listen to the murmurs of your organization. You'll learn a lot. Then make changes. Until you have a day-to-day relationship with your leadership team and you know what's going on in the organization, if you start making changes, you'll never do it. You have to do an internal scan and an external scan before you do any big major changes. And for those people that didn't know what internal or external scans mean, that means you scan everything internally in your organization and you scan things externally in your environment to see what's going to cause a problem or opportunity.
Yeah, that makes sense. Rhonda Parker Taylor, thank you so much for coming on today. I appreciate it. What valuable insights into leadership, EQ, how to balance teams, how to push them and motivate them. There is a leadership gap in many organizations right now. And just because a person gets hired and it's on CNBC for this multinational corporation, a lot of these people don't know their wrists from their elbow, to put it mildly, when it comes to being a leader in that position. And I think that, frankly, there would be a lot of small business owners who could lead multinational corporations in a worthy way because they know how to lead people. They're just people. They're just people leaders. So I appreciate your insights today.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. And I hope everybody out there has a blessed day.
All right. Well, she's Rhonda, Micah. And remember, if you don't go about doing your business, you're going to be doing the business of someone else. Until next time, we're out of here. See you later.